Hello dear friends, this is your personal English coach Divyam here, and today we're going to see an interesting poem called After Blenheim, written in 1798 by Robert Southey. Now on my screen you can see the poem and the difficult word meanings so that it is easy for you to understand. Before we proceed, we should know a little bit about Robert Southey. Robert Southey was born long time ago on 12th August 1774, and he died on 21st March 1843. He was an English poet of romantic school, one of the so-called lake poets and poet laureate for 30 years. So he used to write poems for 30 long years. He was an amazing letter writer. He was a great scholar. He used to write essays very well. He was also a historian and a biographer. Many of his poems are still alive, which means they are still read by British school children. And which are the famous ones? The famous ones are Inchcape Rock, God's Judgment on Wicked Bishop, After Blenheim, and Cataract of Lodore. Now the particular poem which we are going to study, which is After Blenheim, is possibly one of the earliest anti-war poem. Now what is an anti-war poem? It is not in favor of wars. This was the earliest anti-war poem, the poem that we're going to see in few minutes. As I said, he died on 21st March 1843, and he was buried in Crosswaite Church, Keswick, and he had worshipped in that particular church for 40 long years. And if you visit that place, Crosswaite Church, Keswick, you will find something written about him by William Wordsworth, who was his friend. Now, let me give you a little bit of a background about the poem. Now, we already know that After Blenheim is an anti-war poem, which means the poem talks about the bad side of the war, or it is not in the favor of war. And it describes the Battle of Blenheim, which took place in 1704. So, there was a battle, there was a huge battle, there was a lot of killings that took place in 1704, and the poem just describes that. The poem depicts a common man's ignorance about the casualties of war and the pointless grandeur of it, which means a common man, a person like you and me, he doesn't really care about the casualties of war, means how many people died and what happened and who won and who lost, and the pointless grandeur, which means we don't really care about how nice it was and how greatly the battle was won. A common man doesn't really care about the greatness of a war. So let's get right into it. Talking about the first stanza. It was a summer evening. Old Caspar's work was done, and he, before his cottage door, was sitting in the sun, and by him sported on the green his little grandchild Wilhelmine. Difficult word, Old Caspar. Caspar is a farmer who is old. Cottage is a small house. Sported means play in a lively, energetic way. Wilhelmine is a feminine form of William, which means will desire. It's just a name. And let's understand the meaning of the first stanza. So, the first stanza begins with a description of an evening, and it is summer season. The poet introduces the main character. Who is the main character? It is Old Caspar. Now, Old Caspar had just finished his work for the day. He was done with his work, and he was sitting in the sun before his cottage door and watching his granddaughter, whose name is Wilhelmine, play on the field. A little girl is playing in the field, and an elderly farmer named Caspar is sitting at the cottage door. Moving on to the next stanza. She saw her brother, Peterkin, roll something large and round, which he beside the rivulet in playing there had found, he came to ask what he had found that was so large and smooth and round. Let's understand the meanings of difficult word. Peterkin, as you know, is Wilhelmine's brother. It's just a name. A rivulet is a small stream of water. Now let's understand the meaning of this stanza. So while playing, Wilhelmine, the daughter of Caspar, granddaughter of Caspar, saw her brother Peterkin rolling something large, smooth and round. So there's an object that he's found in the field, and it is large and it is smooth surfaced and it is round. And where did he find it? He found it beside a stream of water. And Peterkin was really curious to know what that thing was. And so he turns to his grandfather for information. He goes to the grandfather, Caspar, and asks, "What is this? Please tell me what this is." Moving on to the next stanza. Old Caspar took it from the boy, who stood expectant by. And then the old man shook his head, and with a natural sigh, "'Tis some poor fellow's skull," he said, "who fell in the great victory." Meaning of difficult word. What is the meaning of expectant? Expectant meaning showing an excited feeling that something is about to happen. So Caspar was really curious to answer, curious to know, and Caspar is excited to answer the question. Sigh is to release a sad breath. So the meaning is emit a long, deep, audible breath expressing sadness. So something like this. This is nothing but it is. It is a short form of the word it is. Some poor fellow's skull, said he who fell in the great victory. Okay, now let's understand the meaning of this stanza. So Caspar, the old farmer, he took the thing from Peterkin, his grandson, and he shook his head with sadness. And he said, "Grandson, this is just a poor fellow's skull. And this fellow died in the war. And so these are his remains." And the last line, "who fell in the great victory," is nothing but an irony, because he says that it was a battle. It was a battle, which they call it as a great victory. And at the other side, he is sad to see the skull of a person. So great victory at the cost of human lives, and that is why it is an irony. Moving on to the next stanza. "I find them in the garden, for there's many here about. And often when I go to plough, the ploughshare turns them out. For many thousand men," said he, "were slain in that great victory." Meaning of plough is large farming implement. Ploughshare means the main cutting blade of the plough behind the coulter. So these are just the apparatus for farming. Slain is the past tense of the word slay, which means to kill a person or animal in a violent way. Let's understand the meaning of this stanza. Caspar is still speaking to his grandson, and he tells him that whenever he is farming, he finds many such skulls, that similar to the one his grandson had found. And he says that he had found many skulls while plugging the land, as thousands of soldiers were killed in the victorious war. Now these dead bodies, they lie unnoticed. He tells his son that there are many dead bodies in the field, and they're not really noticed by anyone. But Caspar then uses the term great victory, which expresses his pride at the sacrifice of the soldier who played a vital role in the war. Moving on to the next stanza. "Now tell us what was all about. Young Peterkin," he cries, and little Wilhelmine looks up with wonder-waiting eyes. Now tell us all about the war and what they fought each other for. Meaning of difficult word "twas" is nothing but it was. Wonder, waiting, eyes. Now I've seen this question being asked in your textbooks. Wonder, waiting. Wonder, you already know. It's something related to curiosity or interest, and waiting is nothing but awaiting, means those eyes which are curious. So when we say eyes, it means the person who is wondering or the person who is curious. Let's try and understand the meaning of this stanza. So the children, the grandchildren who were playing and apparently who had found a skull, and they were constantly curious, interested to know more about what it was from their grandfather. And so the conversation is still going on, and they're pretty excited to know more about the war, about the roots and what happened. So they're asking their grandfather, and they had associated a sense of thrill and adventure and excitement with the idea of war and sacrifice. So as soon as Caspar told them that it was all about the war and how the soldiers sacrificed themselves for the great victory, Peterkin and Wilhelmine, both of them were absolutely curious and wondering what would have happened. So little Wilhelmine looked up to her grandfather in anticipation or in expectation with a lot of curiosity, and in this particular stanza the poet attempts to distinguish the kind of curiosity and enthusiasm associated with the child. So you know, the little children are always eager to learn something or the other. So this stanza depicts just that. Moving on. It was the great English, Caspar cried, who put the French to rout. But what they fought each other for, I could not well make out. But everybody said, quoth he, that was a famous victory. Meaning of the difficult word. French to rout. What is the meaning of rout? A disorderly retreat of defeated troops. So this basically means defeat. What means said. Twas means it was. The meaning of this stanza is something like this. It was English. So Caspar, the old farmer, said it was English means one of the army was led by English, and the Battle of Blenheim was one of the major battles of the War of Spanish Succession, which the English successfully defeated Franco-Bravian army. So this is the background of the war. The war is called Battle of Blenheim, one of the major battle of the War of Spanish Succession. So because the Spanish could succeed, the war was fought, in which the English army were able to defeat the Franco-Bravian army. So Caspar takes a pride in the great victory. But on the other side, when the grandchildren are asking him the exact reason of why the battle was fought, he has no answer. He did not even try to find out the purpose. He did not even dig out in his mind as to why the war was fought. He just chose to know what others told him regarding the war, and constantly he is telling his grandchildren it was a famous victory. Next stanza. My father lived at Blenheim then, yon little stream hard by. They burnt his dwelling to the ground, and he was forced to fly. So with his wife and child he fled, nor had he where to rest his head. Difficult words. Blenheim. Blenheim, is a village name. The Battle of Blenheim. Blenheim is a place, name of the place. Yon little stream hard by. Yon is nothing but that little stream hard by. They burned his dwelling, meaning of dwelling is place of residence. So if a person stays at some place, that's a place of stay, it's called dwelling. And he was forced to fly. So with his wife and child he fled, nor had he where to rest his head. Let's understand the meaning of this stanza. So, Caspar is constantly recalling memories from his past. He's telling his children that once upon a time in Blenheim, Caspar's father used to stay, and the French soldiers came and burned his house of several innocent people, and one of them was Caspar's father. The destruction forced people to leave the village in search of a safer place, and Caspar's father also fled the village with his wife and young Caspar in search of shelter, but he was unable to find because it was a very horrific war, and therefore Caspar's family was homeless. Moving on with the next stanza. With fire and sword the country round was wasted far and wide, and many childing mother then, and newborn baby died. But things like that, must be at a very famous victory. There are no difficult words here, but if we understand the meaning, then you would be able to relate the word with the meaning. Okay, this particular stanza shows the bad side of the war, or we can say the evil or horrific aspects of the war. The symbol of fire and sword embodies the evil spirit of human cruelty and destruction. The image of death of pregnant mothers. So, what is the meaning of childing mother? Childing is nothing but pregnant. Let me write that down here. Pregnant, pregnant mothers. Okay. So, the image of death of pregnant mothers and newborn babies heightens the idea of ruination of human beings caused by none other than men themselves. So, people killing people, and people killing not any other type but mothers who were childing or pregnant mothers. So the idea basically is to express how thousands of innocent people and thousands of innocent lives are taken due to meaningless war, and the war which is meant only to bring damage and destruction. So in every stanza, if you see, there's this line, at every famous war. So these two lines, things like that, must be at every famous victory. So the stanza on top describes the horrific things that happen, but then the irony is depicted by the line at every famous victory. So the irony is made evident as he says that these things are meant to happen at every battle where there is a great victory. Next line. They say it was a shocking sight after the field was won, for many thousand bodies here lay rotting in the sun. But things like that, must be at a very famous victory. Now, again, there are no difficult words here, but there are a couple of words which might need a little bit of reflection. We would know the exact meaning after we understand the meaning of the stanza. So let's understand the meaning. What's going on here? It is in inverted comma, so definitely it is spoken by Caspar, and then he describes the agony of war. He says it was a shocking sight. It was a very appalling or disturbing sight of the battlefield that was full of dead bodies of the soldiers rotting in the sun. So people have killed people, and they are soldiers, and their bodies lie in the sun, and they are actually rotting. The poet attempts to bring in consideration the indignity in the way the soldiers lie. They're reduced to the status of inanimate object. So now the soldiers and the bodies are lifeless. Okay, so they are none other than an inanimate object, or we can say a lifeless body or an object. So the bodies of the soldiers are compared with objects. There is no dignity, no glory, only misery. Even after such terrifying aspects of war, Caspar regards it as famous victory which emphasizes on the ignorance of old man about the purpose and consequence of the war. I hope the stanza is understood. Next, great praise the Duke of Marlborough, 1, and our good Prince Eugene, why 'twas a very wicked thing, said little Wilhelmine. Nay, nay, my little girl, quoth he, it was a famous victory. So there are a couple of difficult words. What's the meaning of Duke? Duke is a male holding highest hereditary title in British. So still today you'll hear the word Duke because it still exists. What is Marlborough? Is the name of the place. So a place where a male is holding the highest hereditary title in the British is called Duke. The meaning of 'twas you already know. 'Twas is nothing but it was. Wicked is cruel or morally wrong thing. Nay is nothing but no. What is said? Let's understand the meaning of this one. Duke of Marlborough was an English general. He was the commander of British forces in the Battle of Blenheim. Prince Eugene and Duke of Marlborough represented Britain in the battle and defeated the French at Blenheim. This is the background of the war again. Caspar sang praises for the men who brought the famous victory to the nation. But Wilhelmine, confused at the meaningless praises, exclaims the war was a wicked thing. So the little girl, she's listening to her grandfather's story and she's not really understanding the concept. She's wondering, at one side there is war and at the other side my grandfather is praising by stating that the war was a famous victory. So she's pretty confused. For the first time in the poem we see the disapproval of the false glory of war. But shutting the little child, Caspar goes on to repeat the same thing. The war for him is not a wicked thing as long as it is a famous victory. Finally, the last stanza. And everybody praised the Duke, who this great fight did win. But what good came of it at last? Quoth little Peterkin. Why, that I cannot tell, said he, but it was a famous victory. The meaning of the words you already saw earlier. Quoth means said, 'twas means it was. So let's understand this stanza. Caspar, the old farmer, he goes on boasting of the Duke or praising the Duke because he helped win. The grandson, Peterkin, he's pretty innocent and he asks his grandfather, what good comes out of such misery? What's the point of killing him? The elderly farmer is unable to answer the question. All he can say is, my grandson, it was a famous victory, so I cannot tell you what misery comes out. This remark heightens the sense of irony in the poem, as in spite of such cruelties and casualties, the old man sticks to his illogical belief that the war brought victory to them. So friends, this is all about the poem After Blenheim. So how do we summarize or how do we conclude the poem? After Blenheim, also called Battle of Blenheim, it was written during Southey's Jacobin years. There are many critics who explain this poem as the most celebrated British anti-war poems, the poems which does not really favor wars. And it's also very important, and it should be mentioned that after 22 years, or we can say after years of after Blenheim, Southey changed his pacifist view of war, and he said that Battle of Blenheim was greatest victory which he had ever done honor to the British arms. So friends, I hope you've understood this poem. If in case you have doubts, please mention them in the comment section. If you think you need explanation to any other concept in your syllabus, do mention it in the comment section, and most importantly, subscribe so that you get notifications about my videos. Another important thing is, do share this video with your friends so that your knowledge expands and you can talk about the battles, talk about the victories, and how humans killed humans, and know the history in them. I thank you for watching, and I hope you have a nice day. Goodbye.